Have you ever looked at someone and thought you had them all figured out? Maybe the quiet person at work or the one who serves your coffee, the people we pass by every day without a second thought. What if I told you that the most profound lessons don't come from grand universities or expensive mentors, but from the most unexpected places? This is a story about a man who thought he knew everything, and the woman he never saw coming. It's a story about how a simple game can change a life forever. Let me take you to the top of the world. To a penthouse that scraped the clouds, all glass and cold steel, overlooking a city that twinkled like a carpet of fallen stars. This was the kingdom of Arthur Vance. And Arthur? Well, Arthur had everything, or at least everything money could buy. His home was a museum of his own success. Polished floors that reflected the skyline, shelves lined with books bound in leather, beautiful but unread. Trophies and awards sat gathering a fine layer of dust, memories of victories that felt empty now. He was a king, sure, but a king in a cage of his own making. The silence in that vast, beautiful space was the loudest sound he heard every day. On this particular evening, the weight of it all was crushing him. He sighed, a heavy, bored sound, and tossed a gold-plated pen onto his desk. "Another pointless day," he muttered to the empty room. His housekeeper, a kind, older woman named Clara, stepped in softly. "Dinner is ready, sir." Arthur waved a dismissive hand without looking at her. "Dinner can wait, Clara. I'm bored." His restless gray eyes scanned the room, looking for a distraction, any distraction. And they landed on her. In the corner of his vast library, a young woman was quietly dusting the shelves. She moved with a gentle, efficient grace, almost like a ghost. He had to search for her name. "You," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Sophia, right?" She straightened up and turned, her hands clasped in front of her simple beige apron. "Yes, sir." A slow, cynical smirk spread across Arthur's face. An idea, cruel and born entirely of his own privilege, sparked in his mind. It would be a joke, a way to pass the time. He gestured to the magnificent chessboard that sat on a central table between two plush armchairs. It was a work of art, the pieces hand-carved from ebony and ivory. "Come. Sit," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "Let's see if you can tell a pawn from a bishop." A flicker of something, surprise, hesitation, crossed Sophia's face. "I don't think that's..." "That's right," Arthur interrupted, a dry laugh escaping him. "You don't think. You just follow orders." He leaned back in his chair, the king holding court. "Humor me." Clara, the housekeeper, watched from the doorway, a worried frown on her face. But Sophia, after a moment's pause, walked over. She slowly wiped her hands on her apron, a simple, humble gesture, and took the seat opposite the most powerful man she had ever met. "If you insist, sir," she said, her voice soft but clear. Arthur began setting up the pieces with a practiced flair. "White or black?" "I'll take black, sir," she replied. Arthur arched an eyebrow. "Of course you will," he said under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. He meant it as an insult, a confirmation of her place in his world. He was white, the first mover, the aggressor. She was black, reactive, the underdog. It was all a part of the game he was playing in his head. He moved his first pawn forward with a confident click. "I was trained by the best, you know," he said, already preening. "Grandmasters. Let's see what you've got." Sophia studied the board for a long, quiet moment. Her gaze was intense, absorbing. Then, with a steady hand, she mirrored his move, pushing her own pawn forward. He smirked. "Copying already. Typical." Sophia's eyes lifted from the board and met his for just a second. "Sometimes the best first move, sir, is the one your opponent underestimates." Arthur looked up, mildly amused. "Is that so?" "Always," she said calmly. And so the game began. The soft click of the pieces was the only sound in the room for the next few minutes. Arthur's moves were swift, aggressive. He was trying to overwhelm her, to force a quick and humiliating surrender. But Sophia's moves were different. They were deliberate, thoughtful. She wasn't just reacting, she was building something piece by piece. Arthur's initial amusement began to curdle into a sliver of irritation. This wasn't going according to plan. He decided to break the silence, to reassert his dominance off the board. "So, Sophia," he began, his tone casual, condescending. "Didn't finish school, did you?" He moved his knight, expecting a flustered response. He didn't get one. "I finished, sir," she said, her focus still on the board. Then she slid her own knight forward, threatening his center. "Top of my class." Arthur blinked, thrown. "Really?" he scoffed, trying to recover. "And yet you're here, dusting my shelves." Sophia looked up then, and her gaze was steady, direct. It held no anger, only a profound and simple truth. "Top of my class doesn't pay hospital bills, sir." The room went utterly still. Even the air seemed to freeze. Clara, from the doorway, looked down at her feet. Arthur felt the words land in his gut, unexpected and uncomfortable. He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling like the one who was exposed. He tried to cover his discomfort with aggression, moving his queen into a powerful, central position. "Your move," he said, his voice tighter than before. Sophia studied the board, her head tilted. "That's a risky play," she observed. "You think you can predict me?" he snapped, his patience wearing thin. "I already did," she said softly. And with a quiet, final click, she moved her bishop. Check. Arthur Vance, the billionaire, the king of his empire, stared at the board. His mind, usually so sharp, so calculating, went blank. His king was in danger. How had he not seen it? He was trapped, not just on a board of 64 squares, but by the quiet, unwavering gaze of the woman sitting across from him. The joke was over, and the lesson was just beginning. The word hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Arthur Vance stared at the ivory king, now cornered by Sophia's dark bishop. For a second he couldn't process it. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't how the joke was supposed to end. "Excuse me," he finally managed, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. "Your king is in danger, sir," Sophia repeated, her tone as calm as if she were noting that the floor needed polishing. Arthur's jaw tightened. He could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up his neck. He quickly moved his king to safety, the move clumsy, knocking over one of his own pawns in his irritation. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, but the words sounded hollow, even to him. The game resumed, but the energy had shifted entirely. Arthur was no longer the relaxed predator. He was on the defensive, his moves becoming more cautious, more calculated. And with each passing minute, Sophia's quiet confidence seemed to grow. She wasn't just playing the board, she was playing him. Frustration boiled inside him. He needed to regain control. "Tell me, Sophia," he said, trying to sound casual as he moved a rook. "Who taught you this?" "Some YouTube videos." Sophia kept her eyes on the board, her fingers gently resting on the head of her knight. "My father," she said, and her voice, for the first time, carried a faint, distant warmth. "He used to teach chess at the community center. Before he passed." Arthur looked up from the board. He really looked at her. He saw her hands, steady, capable, not the trembling hands of a nervous amateur. He saw the focused intensity in her eyes. These were not the hands of someone who had only ever cleaned floors. What happened to him? The question left his lips before he could stop it. It was a personal question, one he would never normally ask an employee. Sophia moved her knight, executing a subtle, trapping maneuver he hadn't anticipated. "Life happened, sir," she said softly. "He lost his job when the center lost its funding. We lost everything after that." Arthur frowned, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirring in his chest. It was something close to guilt. "And you ended up here." "Yes," she said, her gaze finally lifting to meet his. "But even here I still play. Not just with boards. With choices." He stared at her, truly bewildered now. You speak as if every move in life has some deep meaning. Doesn't it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Every word we speak, every silence we keep, every look we give. That's all chess, sir. Just on a much bigger board. Arthur let out a dry, uncomfortable laugh. You're strange. Maybe, she replied, a small, knowing smile touching her lips. Or maybe I just see things that other people overlook. Like what? Like the fact that you're about to lose your rook. His eyes snapped back to the board. She was right. In his distraction, he had left his most powerful piece completely exposed. A cold dread washed over him. He gritted his teeth, scrambling to salvage the situation. Lucky guess, he insisted. His pride the only thing he had left to defend. No, sir, she said, and her tone was neither proud nor mocking. It was just factual. And that made it so much worse. I just watched where your eyes went before you made your last move. She was reading him, not the board him. His tells, his habits, his arrogance. He felt cornered not by a superior strategy, but by a simple, undeniable truth. He was transparent. The butler, Charles, shifted uncomfortably by the door. Sir, your call with the investors in Singapore. Leave. Arthur barked, his voice sharp enough to make the older man flinch. He didn't take his eyes off Sophia. All of you, get out. When the door clicked shut, they were alone. The only sound was the quiet ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, counting down the seconds of Arthur's crumbling pride. You think you can actually beat me? He challenged, his voice low and tight. Sophia tilted her head, studying the intricate web of pieces she had woven around his forces. It's not about beating you, she said. It's about understanding how you play. He moved a piece sharply, a desperate, aggressive lunge. Then understand this, I don't lose. Sophia's eyes, deep and perceptive, lifted slowly to his. And she said the words that would echo in his mind for days to come. Everyone loses, sir, when they play alone. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. They spoke to a loneliness he never admitted, a hollow victory in every deal he'd ever won. He had no retort, no clever comeback. He could only watch, mesmerized and horrified, as her hand moved across the board again. This move was different. It wasn't cautious or defensive. It was fast, precise, confident. It was the move that had been 10 steps in the making. A move her father had taught her to see not just on the board, but in life and in pain. She looked up, and her gaze was steady. Check, she said again. But this time it was different. He looked at his king. It wasn't just in danger. It was boxed in, cornered. There was no escape. The mighty billionaire, the man who commanded boardrooms and markets, had been utterly undone by the calm, capable hands of his maid. His throat was tight. He could barely get the words out. How did you see that coming? He muttered, more to himself than to her. I've seen this pattern before, Sophia said softly. In chess books, he asked, his ego making one last, feeble stand. In people, she replied. Yes, sir. In powerful men who forget the most important rule. And what rule is that? Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sophia leaned forward slightly, and her words filled the silent, opulent room, changing it forever. They forget that every pawn can become a queen. Arthur Vance sat back in his chair as if pushed. The arrogance, the laughter, the condescension, it all drained away, leaving behind something raw and unfamiliar. He was stripped bare. He looked at Sophia, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as a maid, not as a servant, but as a person of profound depth and quiet strength. The clock ticked once, twice in the heavy silence. Then, in a voice quieter than it had been all night, a voice humbled and awed, Arthur finally spoke. You're not what I expected. And Sophia, with the grace of someone who had long ago mastered her own world, simply replied, No one ever is, sir. She looked at the board, then back at him. It's your move. But Arthur Vance didn't move. He couldn't. The game was over. He just hadn't admitted it yet. The library was quiet the next morning. Sunlight, bright and unforgiving, spilled through the massive windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and falling across the polished surface of the chessboard. The pieces were still frozen in their final, decisive positions. His ivory king trapped. Her dark queen standing tall and victorious. For the first time in his life, Arthur Vance had walked away from a game without finishing it. He had surrendered. Now he sat in the same plush armchair, still in his robe, staring at that board. He hadn't slept. He just replayed the game in his mind, move by move, but more than that, he replayed her words. Every pawn can become a queen. Top of my class doesn't pay hospital bills. Everyone loses when they play alone. Each sentence was a hammer blow to the foundation of his life. He had built an empire by crushing competitors, by seeing people as assets and obstacles. He had never listened, not truly, to anyone he considered beneath him. And yet, this woman Sophia, with her calm voice and her fearless eyes, had exposed a hollow space inside him he didn't even know was there. It wasn't anger he felt. It was respect. A deep, unnerving and thrilling respect. When his butler, Charles, entered with a silver tray bearing his morning coffee, Arthur didn't even look up. "Charles," he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Sir." "Find her. Find Sophia. Bring her back to the library. Tell her I need a rematch." An hour later, Sophia appeared at the doorway. She was back in her beige apron, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Arthur gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She obeyed silently, folding her hands on the polished table, her eyes flickering to the still-set board between them. "If this is about last night," she began. "It is," Arthur interrupted, leaning forward. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a stark, raw intensity. "I don't lose easily, Sophia." A faint, understanding smile touched her lips. "It wasn't about winning, sir." "Then what was it about?" he asked, his voice softer now, genuinely curious. "Perspective," she said simply. "You play the game to control it. I play to understand it. You see pieces. I see patterns." He studied her, this woman who spoke with the wisdom of a philosopher queen. "You talk about life like it's one long game of chess." She met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw no hesitation in her eyes, only a deep, hard-won certainty. "Maybe because for people like me life is a game. One wrong move, and you can lose everything." For the first time, Arthur didn't mock her. He didn't dismiss her. He simply nodded. "Your father," he said. "He taught you well." "He taught me to see the whole board," she replied. "Not just my side of it." Arthur took a deep breath. The decision he had been wrestling with all night finally crystallized. He straightened his back. "Sophia, I want you to work for me. Not as a maid." He let the words hang in the air for a moment. "I want you as a strategist. At Vance Innovations." Sophia blinked, utterly stunned. Her composure broke for a single beautiful second. A strategist? Sir, I don't know anything about corporate finance or business mergers." He offered a small, genuine smile. "Neither did half the men in my boardroom when they started. They just pretend better than most." "Mr. Vance," she said carefully, her voice trembling just a little. "I'm a housemaid. Clean. Cook. I don't belong in your glass tower with all those important people." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze locked with hers. "You think last night was just a game. You read my moves before I made them. You saw my mistakes before I did. You saw me. That instinct, that ability to see the pattern 10 moves ahead. That is what strategy is. I'll hire tutors. I'll get you every resource you need. But Sophia, you have what money can't buy." Sophia's eyes softened, but a shadow of doubt remained. "Sir, people like me, we don't get chances like that. We get used. We don't get trusted." Arthur's reply was immediate and heartfelt. Then let me be the first to change that, he said, his voice low and earnest. You showed me I'm not as smart as I thought I was. The first lesson was that respect doesn't come from a title. It comes from merit. The silence between them was heavy, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was alive with possibility. She finally spoke, her voice a whisper. And if I say yes, and I fail? Then we fail together, Arthur said without a moment's hesitation. But I would rather fail beside a mind like yours than succeed with a boardroom full of cowards. A real, uncertain, but hopeful smile finally spread across her face. You really mean that, don't you? Sophia, he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. I don't say things I don't mean. Not anymore. Weeks turned into months. Sophia's world was turned upside down. Trainers came to her small apartment, filling her days with lessons on finance, market analysis, and negotiation. She studied late into the night, often falling asleep with her head on a textbook. Her father's old chess set sitting on the corner of her desk for inspiration. Arthur checked on her progress, not with the micromanaging eye of a boss, but with the quiet pride of a mentor who had discovered a rare and precious talent. When she walked into her first board meeting, the whispers were audible. A maid turned strategist. They laughed behind their polished smiles and expensive ties. But Arthur silenced them with a single icy look. She is here, he stated, because she earned it. And she proved him right. Within weeks, Sophia, with her unique perspective, spotted a dangerous loophole in a multi-million-dollar acquisition deal, a flaw that every senior executive, every Harvard MBA, had completely missed. Her quick, clear analysis saved the company from a catastrophic loss. After the meeting, Arthur found her in the hallway, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Do you have any idea what you just did? He asked, a look of awe on his face. I corrected a mistake, she said, still sounding a little dazed. You saved my company, he corrected her, his voice full of emotion. That's more than anyone else in that room has ever done. She looked at him, her gratitude mixed with a newfound confidence. You gave me the chance, sir. I just used it. He smiled, a real warm, open smile. Then use it again, Sophia. And again. I want you by my side. Months later they were back in the library. The setting was the same, the warm light, the endless books, the ornate chessboard between them. But everything else had changed. Sophia wasn't in an apron anymore. She wore a simple, elegant cream-colored blouse and trousers, her posture calm and assured. Arthur, in his navy suit, watched her with a look not of arrogance, but of deep appreciation. He moved a piece. You've improved, he remarked. She countered swiftly, her move elegant and efficient. You've learned to listen. He chuckled. Touched. They played in a comfortable, focused silence for a while, the only sound the soft click of the pieces. It was a dance they both understood now. Finally Sophia smiled gently. Checkmate. Arthur looked down at the board. Trapped again. But this time he didn't feel frustration or humiliation. He felt peace. He looked up and smiled back at her. You win. Again. It's not about winning, she said softly, echoing her words from so long ago. It's about who you become when you stop underestimating others. Arthur nodded, truly humbled. And who did I become, Sophia? She met his eyes, her gaze steady and kind. A better player, she said. A better man. Arthur leaned back, absorbing the words. And you, he asked. Who did you become? Sophia's smile widened, a genuine joyful expression that lit up her whole face. Me. I suppose I just clean up messes on a much, much bigger board now. Arthur threw his head back and laughed, a real, hearty, free sound that filled the library with warmth. You, Sophia, he said, shaking his head in admiration, are a genuine genius. The room fell into a peaceful silence. There were no titles between them now. No billionaire, no former maid. Just two minds, two equals, meeting across 64 squares. And somewhere in the space between power and humility, between a king's pride and a pawn's patience, they both found what they had been missing all along. He had laughed when she first sat at the chessboard. He stopped laughing when she taught him the true meaning of respect. And in the end, her quiet brilliance didn't just change his company. It changed his heart. And that, my friends, is the story of the unseen queen. It's a reminder to never underestimate the people around you, because you never know who might be a queen in disguise. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think, then do me a favor. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more tales about life, humility, and the unexpected turns that make us human. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Where are you watching from and what's your story? Until next time, take care, and remember to look for the queens in your own life.